Hello, my friends, Uncle Monster here. Before we begin this part 2 of the zombie skin tutorial, I just wanted to take a quick moment to make sure that you actually took the time to watch the first part, because if you didn't watch the first part, there's a whole bunch that you're going to miss out on. So if you have watched the first part and you're ready for part 2, then grab all your sculpting stuff, pull it up, and let's make a zombie. So without any further ado, let's roll tape. All right, it's been about 10 minutes now, and we're going to go ahead and continue. So the first thing we're going to do is the stipple technique, where we're going to simply take our brush and we're going to dip it, and we're going to start beating the devil out of this surface. Even though I just smoothed it, I want a fresh, even, semi-rough kind of area. That's going to give us a nice sandpaper texture. Just beat the devil out of it, just like Bob Ross. Now, if you wanted to, you could essentially allow that to dry and just leave that texture. It'll look really good. But we want to take it a little bit further. We're going to go back to using our wire stylus tool, and this time I'm going to go much lighter, and all I'm going to do is just drag it across this to make all kinds of little lines. And I do want to be careful not to allow any of the clay that this picks up to land on the surface, because that'll booger up our surface. So I am going to wipe it between every pass. And if necessary, you can also clean it off in your lighter fluid. Give it a few taps. And now, the key to this is you want to do a whole lot of lines. And I mean a whole lot. Because when we do the next step, most of those lines are going to disappear. A lot of them are going to semi-disappear, and some of them will still remain. And that's what's going to give us that real aged skin kind of look. So this is where you have to just have trust in the tool and trust in the technique. Now you see I left a little bit of a booger on there. I'll just scoop it up real carefully. And I'm doing a whole lot of lines. And I'm making sure they don't all run the same direction. You might want to use a cross-hatching method where you run a bunch one direction and then run a bunch another direction. Or you might just want to use random directions, kind of like I'm doing here. Just all over the place, a whole bunch. Some can intersect, some can run parallel. And that's probably pretty good right about there. Now, again, we're going to want to let this dry before we take our next step. So if you have another area of the sculpt to work on, move to that area and give this time to dry. The biggest complaint that I hear people talk about with the lighter fluid is how it turns the monster clay into mud, and it does. But it's all about having the patience and understanding how to work with it that's the key. So we'll turn our fan back on, take another quick 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll finish this texture up. And I'll also show you a couple of things that you can do to enhance the texture or to alter it to get it to suit exactly what you're looking for. So here we go again. All right, my friends. Well, we've given it about 45 minutes to get really good and dry. And the reason for that is because for this next step, we really want the clay to be really as dry as possible. What you can do is you can test touch a few areas and just make sure it's dry. This is still a little bit wet, but it's dried up enough that we can carry on. So what I'm going to do in the next step is I'm going to take some of this reticulated foam. Again, it comes from the pet store in the aquarium section. It comes in a block like this. I'll trim it down into several different shapes and pieces for getting into different areas, but this will work for us right now. And what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to start just very lightly with the corner, just kind of sanding this down. And what that's going to do is it's going to take the hard edge off those lines that I made. And it's also going to create a whole bunch of little boogers of clay, and that's okay. Don't even worry about those. We just want to make sure we get all of those hard edges knocked down because we want this to be a little bit more organic. Now in some areas, I'm going to apply a little bit more pressure because some areas are a little drier than others. But I'm really just going along and I'm making sure that I'm changing my direction and changing my pressure based on how the clay is responding. And try not to drop you. And just keep on going around and just sanding it down just ever so slightly. The lightest little bits of pressure. And you can see it's creating all these little tiny balls. Don't worry about it. Just keep on going. Change the direction, change your pressure, and just kind of get a feel for how it's responding. All right. We're almost good enough. All right. I think we're good enough there. And now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take our dry brush. Remember, this is the one that we don't want to ever get in fluid. And I'm going to quickly just knock all the balls off, all the little pellets of clay, just flying off into oblivion. This is why we have to occasionally replenish our supply of monster clay. Get rid of all of those little pieces. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my full length brush that I normally use with the lighter fluid, but I'm not going to put it in fluid this time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start burnishing this. That means I'm using moderate pressure, a couple of quick circles, not going too crazy, but just going to burnish it a little bit. There we go. And you can tell when it starts to really look just right, because some of those gaps in between the lines, they're going to start to fill up with clay. And that's what we really want. So a little bit of burnishing. There we go. Now, here comes the fun part. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this piece of plastic that we talked about, and I'm going to take my trimmed brush. It's dry, and I'm going to lay the plastic right on there, okay? And then I'm going to stipple through the plastic. Now you can stipple without, but if your clay is wet at all, these little tiny brush bristles are going to make tiny, tiny little holes. I don't really want that, but I want this to be really roughed up. So we're going to put the plastic on, and that's going to prevent the brush bristles from penetrating the clay. And we're going to just hit it. And this is going to give it a nice texture. Just hitting it kind of everywhere. There we go. That's about it. And then our last stop, going to go back to our glazing brush. We're going to go ahead and get it wet, dry it up some, and now we're just going to very lightly, just ever so lightly, clean it up some. And we don't want to do too much. Just enough to smoothen it out. A little bit more. And remember, if you go with the direction of the line, you'll be digging the line out. If you go against, you'll be depositing clay in the line. So that's how you kind of control how you want it to appear, with the grain or against the grain. There. There's still some blending to be done around the edge, but this has to go all the way up into here and stuff. So I'll work on all that later. I'm really more concerned with right around this open wound, and I'm pretty happy with how it looks. So, as you can see, it's not that difficult to get a good zombified skin texture. Just takes a little bit of patience and a little bit of working with that fluid, and you get to a point where you have to say, good enough. So the next step will be to let that completely dry, and then I got to continue doing the rest of this whole thing. So I've got a long ways to go ahead of me. That brings us to the conclusion of this episode. So again, if you enjoyed this, be sure to click the like button. Be sure to share it with your friends, because you never know who might learn from something like this. And if you want to know when all the newest videos come out, be sure to subscribe on YouTube. So again, thank you for joining me, and be sure to catch me on my next tutorial. Until then, stay scary, my friends. Well, my friends, that concludes part 2 of the 2-part 10-minute tutorial on zombie skin textures. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, be sure to click on the subscribe button so that you'll know when all the new videos come out. And do the world a favor. Go ahead and like and share this video so that other sculptors might come across it and learn some new techniques. Until the next time, my friends, keep on sculpting and stay scary, my friends.